COVID-19 no doubt came with a lot of disruptions to not just the way we live, but the way we do our work and businesses. And that brings to the fore the need for governance for business resilience. And experts say this entails leading from the top. And so, what are some of the pertinent boardroom issues bordering on how companies can respond to business disruption in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic? Well, joining me to discuss this is the governance and risk management partner at Ernst & Young, Benson Oweru, who's here with us in the studio. Good morning, and thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, let's begin this conversation with you telling us how critical would you assess the tone at the top to the success of an organization, of course, as it navigates towards the new normal given the COVID-19 pandemic?
Thank you very much. I think that the new normal, as you rightly call it, is part of the reality that we all have to deal with. And more than ever before, the tone at the top, which is a tone that is set by the leadership, the board of directors, is very important. In the normal situation, it was important. In the critical moments like this, it's even much more important. Board of directors have a responsibility to set that tone. And because of the experience and the wisdom that the board and its members have, it's important to bring that weight of wisdom and experience in setting the tone. And one of the things that is critical to also note is that the board also has responsibility to ensure that the tone that is set is also lived. So how does that connect to the values of the organization? And in terms of the communication, in terms of the kind of incentives to promote, the right culture in the organization. These are very crucial times, and I think that more than ever before, it's important that that tone is set. Now we're talking about reopening of organizations, and as we think about that, we also need to ensure that the communication that comes from the board is clear, is precise, and is able to help lead the organization out of the crisis, even beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you.
Now, how can institutions actually ensure that they are well prepared and, they have the necessary procedures in place to handle the phased reopening, just as you talked about now, and return to normal operations in a manner that is still socially responsible?
So the phased reopening is a very critical stage, especially when you think of the COVID-19 pandemic that we're dealing with. I think organizations, particularly the board, must engage with management to structure the kind of reopening that is needed for the organizations to continue to operate in this kind of times. What do I mean? We have to particularly pay attention to employee safety. So when you are reopening, it's important to place at the fore the whole arrangement around the safety, okay, the well-being and the health of your employee, which is very important at the foundation of that decision. So it's a very thoughtful decision that organizations have to make, particularly the board. So management has to engage with the board to give assurance regarding the process of reopening. What we have seen is some organizations, particularly for example, EY, for example, we have actually opened, but it's been phased. And before we opened, we took very specific measures to ensure that all the necessary pre-opening protective and safety precautions are made. And also we ensure that at a particular point in time, only an amount of employees are allowed into the office. All the needed PPEs, personal protective equipment, are in place, and that also the necessary technology infrastructure is available to support our employees. So we have the two phases, some employees who are in the office and those who are also working remotely. And as we navigate this pandemic, lots more of employees would actually work remotely. And I think it is important that the board is on top of that decision, engaging with management and also paying attention to the safety and the health of their employees.
And now, how can directors actually ensure that critical lessons drawn from the front lines are actually brought to the fore of the board and incorporated into strategic decision making?
So I think the lessons learned from this whole crisis is useful for leadership, for governance of institution. And it's important that that lesson is brought into the business. Now, I give you an example. There's a supermarket chain, for example, a big supermarket chain that had to design a WhatsApp chat box. And actually what they did was, in designing the chat box with the data of their customers, they were able to send messages to their customers to let them know the most quiet times to come for shopping. So that way, they are able to reduce the measure of interactions or customers crowding the mall, and also helping to social distance, which is part of COVID-19 measures to reduce the spread of the virus. So that's bringing lessons learned. Also, it's important that from the feedback we've gotten from NCDC and all the regulators, we need to apply some of the lessons that we're seeing. The virus has not gone. We are seeing the spikes and the increase, in the coronavirus. People are contacting it every day. So we all need to stay safe, and I think that the board must pay attention to that and get assurances from management. And also, that should also form part of the business strategy going forward. How do we begin to reflect the lessons learned in our strategy? How do we review our operations? What do we do with our employees? And how do we guarantee that business as usual will continue in the organization?
And from what you've talked about, of course, using the supermarket as an example, now we see that technology actually has a role to play here.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's a very critical component, because more than ever before, the talent management conversation is now even more critical, because you have employees who need to be technology savvy, who are able to use technology more efficiently because of remote work. So, and that also creates a potential cyber risk and technology risk, because people are going to be working remotely. We need to secure our networks and ensure that even while at home or wherever they're working from, there's a measure of confidence that the business is protected and that our customers and our general stakeholders are also protected. So it's a real conversation, and this is the new normal, like we all say. And I think that the board has a critical role to play to also provide governance and leadership for the organization in these very crucial moments.
But there are some board members who would believe, why should a staff work from home? Why do I have to pay that staff, his or her full salary, he's working from home? What would you say about that?
Yeah, I think that conversation is ongoing. Why do you need to pay? But you see, the truth is, work from home, like you already know, is now a new reality. And there are measures organizations are putting in place to promote efficiency. So what is the return on investment? How do you ensure employees are productive? How do they continue to deliver value for the organization? So it's actually the conversation around the measure of value that we place on our employees. And don't forget that keeping your employees safe is the foundation for, for every organization who has value, delivery at its center. So once we have that conversation, it's important that we endeavor, as a matter of fact, to make sure that we provide the necessary support for our employees to continue to produce results, to engage with the organization. And once we see that value, that conversation, I don't think, would be a challenge. And so productivity is one of the key determinants, to ensure that our employees remain, relevant to our business. We've seen instances where also board members and even executives had to, forgo some of their packages, their salaries at sacrifice to keep the employees, going in the organization. So organizations must have the conversation around the value creation for the business. And at the center of it is our employees. And we must ensure that first and foremost they're protected, but also determine how productive in terms of their contribution to the business.
But some would also argue that not all, jobs can be done remotely. Some have to be physically present. How about that argument?
Yes, so there are those arguments around physical presence in the office, and what we have seen, like you rightly alluded to, is the use of technology. And more than ever before, artificial intelligence and robotics are becoming, measures through which organizations are reducing, the physical presence of employees, digitizing processes, and ensuring that the organization becomes more agile and nimble in its business operations. So for those services or operations where it is very important for employees to be in the office, what we normally say is that the minimum precautionary measure is to put in place those safety nets. Okay, and that means we must make sure that the environment is safe. All the necessary safety guards have to be in place. And once we get those assurances, therefore, we can continue to allow such employees, in the environment to operate.
Now, how can the board actually use diversity to promote good corporate governance practices in an organization?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. Diversity it's a big success factor for organizations who understand its impact and implication. And the United Nations actually recommends 30% from a gender diversity point of view for boards, and we've seen a lot of our companies here in Nigeria, particularly, paying more attention to gender diversity, which is now like a new norm. But interestingly, we can also look at diversity from other perspectives. Okay, there's diversity in terms of experience. Now, in a pandemic of this nature, you want to be able to bring into your board a diversity that brings in people with various backgrounds. Technology is becoming big now, because we are working remotely. So we need to ensure that on the board we have the diversity of experience. So there's a balance of people with varied experiences in the boardroom, and they bring that experience to be in the business. We also have diversity in terms of race, age. People are talking about millennials and Generation Z, and people are asking, what do we need to do? Organizations currently are actually thinking of bringing millennials into the board, just to have a blend of skill sets, to help with the robustness of conversations as well as deliberations in the boardroom, which will lead to quality decision making and for the overall good of the organization. So we can look at diversity from the lens of a number of factors. So there's a gender diversity, there's experience in diversity, there's race in diversity, and age also, like I mentioned. So bringing diversity as a key success factor is critical for most organizations who truly are futuristic and also want to thrive in the new normal.
Now, to what extent does the existing culture within an organization actually impact the communication and implementation of board decisions, and how can we actually promote the right culture within our organizations?
So culture is the foundation of any organization. It's the way we do things around here. And you can tell an organization just by its culture. And it's important because more than ever before, organizations post-COVID-19 era would be measured by the quality of culture that they have. And one of the key things that I have advocated is that the board sets the culture for the organization. It starts from the top. So we talked about the tone at the top. Culture actually is that foundation, because when we communicate or set the tone, what we are doing is a set of values, defining a set of norms and practices that regulate our behaviors in the organization. So the board has that responsibility for defining the culture of the organization. The culture has to be very clear. It has to be consistent. It has to be precise. And beyond just setting the tone through the culture, there must be exemplary behaviors. How do we also reward good behaviors in the organization? You often hear people being punished, for breaching the rules or breaching the culture in the organization. It's also part of a culture where people are rewarded, are incentivized for demonstrating and exhibiting good behaviors in the organization. So culture is the foundation. And I advocate that organizations, especially in these times, must think of a culture of innovation, okay? And a culture of entrepreneurship, because these are the times where organizations need to now reinvent themselves, beyond COVID-19 to be able to position themselves to continue to create value for the bigger stakeholders. So it's a critical component for success in any organization, and I think that culture is very important for most businesses in times like this.
And with all of this now, how can boards actually ensure that employees who are actually key stakeholders in this now are best protected while implementing crisis management initiatives?
So I said employee safety is first and foremost, and the board must pay attention to the safety of employees. And very importantly also is the fact that because no organization operates in isolation, employees make the difference. They are responsible, for generating revenues. They're responsible for the operations of the business. And we must ensure that they are safe. And so the board must, in consonant with the management, or management working with the board, must provide those assurances that our employees are safe. And that includes making sure that the environment where our employees work or where they will be returning to when the lockdown is completely over is a safe and secured environment. We must also protect them by ensuring that we give them the assurances. In EY, for example, we have one of our values, humans at the center. Humans are always going to be at the center of everything we do because they make all the difference. And once we identify humans at the center, then we now begin to put in place those measures that give them comfort and assurances that they are first and foremost the most important assets in every organization.
Thank you. Governance and Risk Management Partner at Ernst & Young, Benson Uweru. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much. Thank you.